Hello, this is Yehna.
And this is Jessie.
We are excited to be back with another episode from our Living as Sent series. We wrestled through many different questions, but today we wanted to invite you and ask the question, do you want to grow? So welcome and join us at
At the
the
table.
table.
Alrighty. Today we are talking about do we really want to grow? And so we're going to touch on some of the things that we will face as we navigate that. And then just talking about what was our personal turning point with realizing that, okay, it's time to grow and we want to grow. And then some points we want to share that might be encouraging for you guys. So let's get started. What are some things that we face or we have faced in the past when it came to the topic of finding growth and seeking growth?
So many, but we've named three-ish. I say this because there's probably so much more that leads out of this. But the first one we mentioned was laziness.
Hmm.
Even as I say it out loud, I'm being convicted again today as I say it. Oh man.
Oh, yeah. It's as small as staying in that job that you said you always wanted to leave, but you just never left, and it's been like 10 years, or staying in that relationship when you know it's not great for you, but you just don't want to go through the pain and the hassle of it. Or it's just normal that people crave comfort and quote unquote stability, not
Hmm.
necessarily stability in maybe the right things, but just want to be where you're at with the things that you know and are used to.
Hmm.
And we all can admit that we want that, right?
Yeah. And we want to preface, we're not saying familiarity and comfortability is necessarily inherently evil or bad, but it's when that becomes
Right.
what consumes our life and our mind and the things that motivate us to stand still and be stuck because laziness is one of those things that are just so hard to come face to face with because when it comes to laziness, the image that pops into our minds is maybe being a potato couch, not wanting to move physically, but it really can be about even the laziness of needing a mindset shift and
Mm.
needing that shift in even maybe our environment or the people we interact with or even how we use our words and the ways we formulate our thoughts and things that we put on the back burner but very much impact the way we interact with life and people. And so just thinking, are you ready for being convicted? Are you ready to confess the things that cause our laziness and discomfortability? And are you ready? This one was really strange for me, but I wanted to write it down because at least for some of us, it was particular can be particularly hard is the act of being truly comforted and to be truly seen.
Can you expand more on that for us?
Because when we think, oh, to be comforted could just mean, oh, you're doing great, there's words of encouragement, and those are nice, but when someone truly sees you and the tendencies that the unhealthy tendencies that we lean towards, and for someone to really see that and the ways our heart is oriented, and in their humility and in their love, they come to us and say, hey, I've noticed that you haven't shown up to, let's say, the gym that much in these days, or you haven't talked about your family in a while. And I just wanted to check in and see if everything is okay. Is there anything that I can walk with you? And then that moment, making sure it kind of leads in, a little bit into the second point, but not to go too much into it. Allowing yourself to be in that and in that discomfort of, oh my goodness, this person wants me to share my life to them, and being okay with
Mm.
that and receiving
Re-
prayer.
I was just about to say, like, receiving that is the hard part.
Mm,
That, oh, people actually care about my well-being and about the growth of me as a person. And for people to point that out, it's uncomfortable, but just that comfort that you also feel. Okay, so yeah, that makes
hmm
so much more sense.
Yeah. But that leads to the second point of pride of
Mm.
when someone sees you, changing that mindset of, oh, they're not here to attack me, come at me and do like a, oh, got you moment, and also being curious of, why am I reacting that way? Why am I
Mm,
so defensive and so ready to jump on this person's question of simply asking how I've been and kind of giving yourself the space and time to wrestle with that question of, what about that was I so irked and frustrated?
hmm.
Yeah. Any other perspectives?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, pride is definitely a huge one that creeps in when it comes to growth because you feel as though that means you're incompetent or that you're not where maybe people think you should be, or
Hmm.
just seen as if you have failed or you're not good enough, maybe, or that you're not strong enough
Hmm.
to overcome or to realize or to actually do something about it. Just like not feeling like you're allowed to be where you're at. And so then you try to, I don't know, overcompensate or stuff like that. But where does pride creep in for you?
All of the above.
Oh,
Just kidding. I mean, not kidding. It's actually so true. I think as you were speaking, something that popped into my head, maybe it's the Lord speaking. I'm feeling convicted at this moment. But it's when someone doesn't see me as emotionally intelligent. I think I get super
oh,
defensive when I have nothing
mm,
to contribute or I don't have the words to comfort someone truly or I'm not able to speak life into someone and then I get really down about it and I think to myself, who do you think you are that you think you can assume and know everyone's story? I can barely
mm,
digest my own. Who am I to think, And that pride of me thinking I should know everything gets in the way of me truly knowing someone and
mm,
truly sitting with someone's pain and being okay with the silence of the uncomfortable emotion that I feel of feeling incompetent, of being a failure, not feeling strong enough to handle their pain, and feeling like, oh my gosh, what if they see me as someone who just like has no idea and doesn't care about me? And even if they do, what does that matter to me? Why does that matter so much to me? Yeah.
like you're trying to say that like you yourself are preventing
Hmm.
yourself
Mm.
from, yeah, receiving that. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. How about you?
Mm.
Just kidding. Not to like throw the ball at you. Tell me about your pride.
Oh man. I think the pride creeps in when I people point out something that I need to shed or let go or move on from,
Hmm.
but emotionally like I'm not there, I'm not ready to, and feeling that process like people are pointing out that that process should be faster and more clear cut, and because mentally and emotionally I'm not there yet, but then I get called out on that, I feel like my pride creeps in, um, and wants to justify why that growth hasn't happened in letting go yet. So I think that's what comes to mind with, especially with pride for me.
Oh my
But
gosh. That's so real.
yeah, along with pride, we already talked about this, but a lot of coping mechanisms come to mind. Um,
Hmm.
I touched on overcompensation, but a lot of anger and numbing. I feel like we should touch more on that, especially numbing is such a huge thing in our generation.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as we grow, we're gonna be uncomfortable. We're gonna feel so called out and really, really, really vulnerable. And then our body is gonna go into survival mode. And that looks in so many ways. And so we we work to protect ourselves, So numbing, anger, overcompensation. And so the one that comes to mind, at least for myself, and as Jessie was saying, a lot of things that our generation are struggling with and are working with, I can't talk, working towards freedom from is, numbing and disassociating and putting things in the back burner. This can look a different way. And I name examples. Some of these are going to feel very calling outy, and I hope that you don't take this in a way that I'm like, these are sinful things, but things to consider. And I say this to myself, looking at myself through Zoom. And one is scrolling. We doom scrolling is officially a phrase that we use. And binge watching Netflix, binge like these are or binging through eating. And so these are things that it's just so normalized,
Mm-hmm.
and we are, because our life is overwhelming, there's a lot we have to consider, and being with people all the time, we don't want space of silence, we don't want to sit with our thoughts, and we don't want to, and that could lead to even extreme behaviors of over drinking and over consumption of or abusing substances. And so I know these are extreme examples, and I in no way want to call out shame in these acts, but I also want to be mindful of how this can be harmful to your growth. And so, yeah, that's one I definitely struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
the numbing and the disassociating.
And I like that when you refer to numbing and being with people all the time, that doesn't sound like a bad thing of,
Mm,
oh, I'm surrounding myself with friends and I'm making like, I'm keeping myself busy and just making sure that I get to be with my friends all the time. Like that's all great, but it's definitely you're chasing after something that to avoid really thinking about your inner thoughts and inner reflection. And it's such a easy, quick I don't know, like a pass to use when you're like, no, I'm not numbing, but I'm just with my friends and I'm just busy. Like,
yeah.
but
It's
you're
like
but you're
I'm
really
just
running
spending
away.
quality time with all my people.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that. And I'm like,
When
that's not numbing.
it's I'm just, spending good time.
Yeah, exactly. So I
It's
like that you
so
pointed that
true.
out. Yeah,
What it comes down to when it comes to these coping mechanisms is the motivation. Are,
right.
yeah, it's, are you avoiding something? Are you avoiding something? Are you not wanting to face something? And I also wanted to point out something, because this one I think we kind of bypass, especially as Christians, is the over spiritualizing of things.
Oof.
That I'm like weirdly super on fire for this the past couple months, because I have to check with myself if I'm doing this, because whenever something goes our way or doesn't feel right, we want to say, like, it's the Lord's will, it's God's will, or God will do something about this, and like he'll deliver me, and we use God's name so frivolously. But have you really sat in his presence to seek his guidance and his wisdom in the thing you are working through? And then, yeah, there's
Hmm.
so many more layers to what it looks like for this. This one, I really want to almost be a little bit more stern with my tone of saying this is something we really need to watch out as believers. Yeah.
Hmm. I feel like that can be a separate podcast
Yeah,
episode
that's
just
why I didn't
because
want to go
there's
too
more to,
much.
yeah, I know. Um, Sorry, going back to the whole numbing thing. But thanks for sharing that because I'm like, do I get into it? I don't know.
I didn't know.
Um,
Spicy.
but I think there was value in like adding that point because that's so true. And I'm gonna have to do more reflection on how that definitely shows up in my life. I think the biggest one for me is like overcompensating by like working and having work be an excuse to not change. And that I especially saw that in my first 2 years of teaching, being like, I gotta establish myself. I gotta make a name for myself. Like I gotta be, respected. And so I'm just gonna work, work, work. And that's what I'm pouring into right now. So I don't have time to work on myself
Mm,
and I got it all reversed. I got it all wrong. I have to God first in order to do my work well and to do other things well. But just that using that as an excuse to almost not do what really is important to do because that almost is harder. And
mm.
you're just saying that, oh, work is priority. So how do I have time for that? But it's not true.
And not to say this is also purely your experience, but when it comes to the career of teaching, it has to do with people. So there was an extra layer of that I'm working with people. I am sacrificing my time for
Yeah.
people. And
Yeah.
so I've definitely caught myself in that mindset of it's okay to not do a X, Y, and Z because I'm like so tired from this. And this was good work.
Mm,
And
yeah,
anyway,
for sure. And when I think of all those things, man, what really changed? Because
mm,
as Anna and I were talking about, recording this episode, we are trying to reflect on like what did that season look like? Because there were definitely many seasons like this where that growth was just not there and our hearts were not ready for that. So, what changed to make us want to grow?
first of all, God had to like knock us down. Just kidding. I mean, but really. And I got to a place where I was truly on the ground
Mm,
thinking to myself, this is not okay. Just, it
mm,
simply started with what the heck is happening with my life? What is happening with my friendships? What is happening with my life routine? And what is going on in terms of just there? I had nothing good to say about myself.
mm,
Just every part of me made me, I was just so repulsed by who I was. Obviously, that
mm,
separate need for work, but I just that mindset of, Lord, I just need something. And it was almost that moment of, even though I had no lesson plan of what I needed to change, it was simply saying, clearly, I wasn't supposed to do this by myself. And that
mm.
moment
So real.
really clicked with me. I refer to this story a lot, and it's because it really was that moment when Jessie was vulnerable with me first. And that moment I realized,
Mm,
and even though nothing in her story had Yena Kim in it, I could see myself needing to be in that same posture.
mm,
That was such a big moment. And as I continue to grow, I come back to the how am I doing with my relationship? How am I doing
mm.
in my work, in my lifestyle? And then it's those moments where I say, okay, God, you're telling me to take a couple steps back. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, from what I'm getting is it sounds like you just realized, God, I need you. And that's what really stirred at this desire to be like, all right, it's time to change and I can't do without you, God. And I
Amen.
love that because it just highlights we can't change without the Holy Spirit and true change. I mean, because you can be consistent at running or get better at this or that, but the internal work, the healing part cannot be done without God. And
Mm,
so I like that you highlighted that. For me, I remember before being in that season of radical change, I remember feeling so stuck and knowing that I wanted to change, but not knowing how to get there. I remember reading so many journal entries of, I don't know what's wrong or what needs to change, but I don't feel happy.
mm,
And I am trying, I should try these things, but I don't think that's the right answer. Like I just didn't know where to go. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Like if they're in a relationship that they know they need to get out of, but they just don't know how to do that. Or like, I feel like a lot of people feel stuck, but just don't know how to change and are just in that cycle.
mm,
And I wish I had realized sooner that, and again, I want to give grace for myself because God put me in that season for a reason. And I knew that. I was like, I'm in this season for a reason. And I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I just don't know when that is.
mm,
And realizing that the answer was in the word was not something I realized until much later. And it just comes to show how much the word of God is truly our lifeline. But everyone's on that journey to realize that for themselves.
yeah.
Mm.
Mm. Whew. So
But
good.
all that to say, there are some things we want to wrap up with just to encourage you guys. Because as we were processing and sharing kind of our journeys with growth, just wanted to reiterate that you need to accept the season that you're in and that it might be a season of just a low and it might be slower. And that's the season God put you in. Like sometimes when you feel that, you feel frustrated because you're like, oh, I need to get out of this or like I need to change. But that's a season too. And it's not a wrong season. God uses that too. So sometimes it just means we need a fresh perspective and not necessarily a new environment. Because I was like, oh, I need to change so that my problems go away, or I need to move, or not going to fix it. It's just knowing that this is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Yana?
Yeah, to add to that, in those low seasons when you feel those frustrations, I really want to encourage because this was something I struggled so hard with. And this what a lot of people do is when you're hit with a wall and you're not moving, the immediate tendency is to blame either yourself or the environment or the people around you, but to lean in and instead of blaming, almost like a cry for help because that's no emotion is too heavy for the Lord. And remembering that your anger, your frustrations, the bitterness in your heart, the sadness, the low, or even those small glimpses of hope, bring them all to the Lord and say, the thing I would always say is like, why me? Why this? And just
Mm,
so many whys would be to the table. And at first I didn't because I was so ashamed that I was even feeling that. I'm like, the God of the universe, I can't even bring this to him. This is too much. I don't know what I was going through in my head, but in that moment, it felt my problems were either too small or just too crazy for God to see, but no such thing. And so in those moments, in those seasons of slowness, or even where it's just so hard and chaos is abounding, encouraging you to take space to lay all of that at the Lord's feet.
yeah, just being okay with sitting still
Hmm.
and leaning into that voice. That's so true.
Yes, but with that said, our goal isn't to just stay there forever. And that's not
Yeah.
God's goal either.
Yeah.
And He's going to continue to shape you and to mold you and to put you through fire. Yeah. And, trim off pieces. We are truly a branch. He's going to prune us and it's going to hurt. But
Mm,
walking in faith that the Lord is doing his work and then also leaning in with curiosity of like why was that being taken away or
mm.
what in me is needing to change and yeah.
Yeah. Just that question of, are you shaping your life up for success,
Mm,
for to better yourself with people that are uplifting? Are you using your time to pursue what you truly desire and what God desires for you? Those are questions to think about. And it's okay if you're not at that place where you're, oh, I have the answers or I want to do this, and admitting that you are not there yet. That's okay too. But
mm,
just realizing that we don't want to stay in that forever.
mm-hmm.
But God still meets you in that.
Yeah.
And we're
And
never done. It's a
we're
never ending
never
cycle.
done. That's the good news. And
Hmm.
it feels like a bad news, but it really is good news because there's always grace for you to grow and there's room for you to grow. And you can always keep moving forward. And yeah. And if you have questions like, why do I even have to do this? I want you to ask the question of why am I thinking like this? Because,
That's real.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I wonder. Just kidding. Anyway, I appreciate you all for staying here listening to this because even as we write these points down and as we share them and as we pray through them and as these are not things that we are like, oh, we've done it. Kudos, all done. As we read this, I'm reminded again, oh my gosh, I see how this is appearing in my life right now and applying it in my
Mm.
life right now. And it's almost, this is not stage one, stage two, stage three. It's like, oh, this is a cycle. We're going through it over and over again. Anyway, thank you for listening. All of our episodes are uploaded on Spotify and on YouTube. We appreciate you listening, and our updates will be on Instagram. Until our next episode. Bye.
Bye.